Good morning. I am extremely grateful to be with you here this morning. Appreciate Tim Luss still likes me enough to call me when he needs a preacher, and I'll be glad to fill in anytime I can. You always wonder, when you're coming back to some place that you're familiar with, some place that you haven't been maybe in a while, how people are going to react. And some of it's been really positive, but Justin, he was running a little late. But anyways, he finally gets himself situated and he sits down. He looks to his left and he sees me. And I guess in that moment he thought, oh, Brad Costello's here and he must be preaching. He was like, oh, man. You always kind of hope for a better response than that. But anyways, I just changed my sermon a little bit. I'm going to be preaching directly to Justin this morning. I'm just playing. But you come to a place that you're familiar with, and I have flashbacks. And, we spent a lot of good years over here. The flashback that I had this morning was Julia Duncan. Shortly, I worked here for a summer, unmarried, and then the next married, me and Amanda, of course, were married. And I continued working here, and we babysat the Duncan 3 at that time. That was before the crazy Joe dunk. But anyways, Julia was just a little baby. If you look at Julia now, she's not a little baby. But anyways, I remembered this morning when I saw her and hugged her that, I used to put her to sleep for nap time. And, things certainly changed. I want to apologize that my family is not here this morning except for Noah. Amanda, it was her last Sunday morning teaching her class, so she felt like she needed to be there for that, obviously. And then, of course, the other two, they're the ones who wake up late, so they were going with her. But they'll be back this evening. I hope that they can, have a chance to still see each and every one of you, because I know that, this place means as much to Amanda, and Blake probably remembers it a little better than Kayleen, but I know that they still love their times when they get to visit here with you guys at Grundy Street. So we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 11 to begin with this morning. The verses are on the screen, but if you'd like your own Bible, feel free to open up to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to begin reading, and we're going to read the first 13 verses. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks. By faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith he dwelt in the land of promise as in the foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundation, whose builder and maker is God. By faith Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child, and when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received promises, and having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. If we kept reading here this morning, we would read of many other what we call heroes of faith. But we're not using this passage this morning because I want to talk about the number of heroes that are mentioned here. We're using this passage this morning because I want us to see that God is interested in one person. If you notice that through this passage in Hebrews chapter 11, it contains many people. And even in the chapter 12, just past this, they're called a great cloud of witnesses. It still remains true that God is not identifying these people as how many there are, but as individuals. You see, God isn't focused on the crowd. He is focusing on the individual. And this is true in the rest of the Bible as well. God is absolutely interested in one person. Now, we know that in passages like John chapter 3, verse 16, God is absolutely interested in the whole world of people, but he loves the whole world as individuals. And of course, God can use the whole world. He can use masses to accomplish his purpose, but he just as easily can use one person to accomplish his purpose as well. Now, I don't know if this number is 100% accurate, but some archaeologists say that in the days of Noah, there were approximately 1 million people who were on the earth at this time. Now, because of the ever-increasing evil that was going on during these days, God reached the point where his patience had just ran out, and he decided that he was going to destroy mankind and start fresh. So if we take the number that the archaeologists say, about 1 million people, then we could literally say that Noah was 1 in 1 million. And this is where I want us to focus our thoughts this morning. Noah was 1 in 1 million. And we need to think, why? What was it specifically about Noah that God was able to use him in these days to start fresh? And more importantly to us this morning is what qualities, what characteristics did Noah possess that if we added these characteristics and qualities in our own lives, that we too, like Noah, could be 1 in 1 million. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 6, which was just read a moment ago, and we're going to look at a couple of the characteristics that Noah possessed. And if we add those, then perhaps we too can be like Noah, and we can be 1 in 1 million. And as you're sitting here this morning, I want you to imagine that if God is about to destroy the earth, and he is searching for the faithful, where would he find you? Where would he find your family this morning? In Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 9, as was read just a moment ago, the Bible tells us that the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of the heart of man was evil continually. And the Lord saw, or was sorry, that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry I've made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. The first thing I want you to understand, if we consider the life of Noah and the characteristics that he possessed, I want us to look at 4 specific things that he had in his life that we can add in our lives in order to be 1 in 1 million. First of all, we have to understand that God uses people who are available. We need to know this morning that God is not necessarily looking for the most extraordinary person. He's not looking for the most talented. He's not looking for the wealthiest. He's not looking for the most educated. And thankfully for people like me and Tim Lusk, he's not even looking for the best looking. You see, we need to understand that God is omnipotent. And he has the power to bless us. He has the power to equip us with everything that we need to serve him. So our job then is to be available to him. You see, what God cannot do because of his own restrictions is he cannot violate our free will. See, every one of us this morning, we have the freedom of choice. God created us with the freedom of choice. We can either make ourselves available to him or we can resist him. But if we choose to be available, then he promises us to equip us with things like time or talent and the energy that we need to serve him. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 10 through 11, Paul tells us that God gives seed to the sower and he gives bread for food. And he can and will supply our needs for a harvest of righteousness. You see, it's not about what I bring to the table. It's not about how great I am. It's about whether or not I've made myself available to him. He can and will supply what I need in order to accomplish his purpose on this earth. We need to understand it's no great power that we have that allows us to make an impact in this world. It's what he can provide us because we've made ourselves available to him. You see, availability is more important than ability. Just like attitude is greater than aptitude, God can and will supply the opportunity and the ability, but we must be available. And I seriously doubt that Noah ever considered a construction project as massive as building the ark. Yet when God commanded that he do it, he accomplished that goal. Not because of any knowledge that he had, but God provided. Noah simply made himself available. Here's the question that we all have to consider this morning. When God providentially places opportunities in your lives, are you available to him in those moments? When he gives us the opportunity to encourage others, or when he gives you the opportunity to teach someone Christ, are you available to him? You know, you can look around and you can see men and women of great faith who have had an impact in your life. And because they were available to Christ, to God, then they were able to teach us and to teach others. Are we available to God? Or are we so self-focused that a lot of times we just go through our lives and we don't recognize opportunities for God to use us? You see, Noah, he was available to God. Moses and David and Paul, they were all available. Isaiah says in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, "Here am I, send me." If we're going to be 1 in a million, like Noah was, we have to make ourselves available to God. So when those opportunities come about, we're there. And we take advantage of those opportunities, not with the power that we have, but the opportunity and the powers that God provides to us. We have to be available to him. Secondly, I want you to consider this morning that God uses people who dare to be different. You know, I know that sounds like a really easy concept, but it's not. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, we see that Noah was a just man. He was perfect in his generation. He walked with God. You think about that. There's somewhere around 1 million people on the earth at this time, and Noah was the only one who was righteous. Noah was the only one who walked with God in these days. He was the only one that was willing to be distinctively different. He was the only one willing to be peculiar. Are we willing to be different like that? You know, it seems that today, too many times, people would rather conform to look more like the world that's around them, to be more like those rather than to be peculiarly different for God. 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9 tells us that the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. You see, God's eyes, they searched the earth in the days of Noah, and they found him. And God's eyes are searching the earth today, and he's looking for those who stand righteous. Do they come to rest on me this morning? Do they come to rest on you? You see, Noah seemed to know that he could be faithful regardless of those that were around him. I mean, think about how challenging it would be to be the only one that walked with God at this time. You think maybe Noah realized that one person with God make a majority? You understand what I'm saying? One person with God is a majority. Young people, do you believe that when you're at school and you have countless friends around you doing whatever they're doing, that you with God on your side, you're a majority? I know it doesn't feel like that, but if you are not afraid to make a stand and to be different on behalf of God, you're a majority. Men and women who have to live and work in the world that is around us, do we understand that when we're in those workplaces that we, with God, are a majority? And because of that, because of our understanding of that, are we willing to take a stand and be different? Like Noah. The whole world around him was unrighteous, yet he took a stand and he chose to be peculiar. How about the church here at Grundy Street? Do we understand that no matter what the churches around us may be doing, that if we stand with God, then we are a majority? We need to understand that we don't have to look like the world around us. And God will provide. He will take care of us. You know, this is a real problem. There are people in schools who call themselves Christians. There's people who go to work every day who call themselves Christians. There are churches of people who claim to be Christians. And they would rather be counted with others than to be different. They would rather be counted with others than to be set apart, to be holy, and to stand with God. But God, He uses people who dare to be different. Did you notice how Noah was different? It says that he was righteous, that he was blameless, that he walked with God. Churches today, Christians today, we don't have to look to try to figure out a new way. If we are righteous, if we are blameless, and if we walk with God, we will be distinctively different, and people will notice it. You see, conformity was a sin in the days of Noah, just like it's a sin today. In fact, conformity, you would almost say it's an enemy of Christianity. But Paul tells us that we are not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, so that we can be living sacrifices. Noah chose not to conform, and he chose not to compromise with the world around him. Joseph, he wouldn't conform, but he maintained his moral purity even when he was tempted in Potiphar's house. Nadab and Abihu, however, they did conform, and they offered strange fire, and they died. Aaron conformed to the Jewish crowd, and he made a golden calf, and a lot of people died. John the Baptist did not conform, and he became a forerunner of the Messiah. And Christ did not conform, and he became our Savior. If we want to be one in a million, we have to be willing to take a stand and to be different. The third thing I want you to consider this morning is that God uses people who never give up. You see, Moses worked on his project of leading Israel to the promised land for 40 years. You imagine? That's a long time for a single project. But Noah bettered Moses by 3 times that. Noah worked on his project of building the ark for 120 years. I'm sure that during this time that there were often days where Noah was extremely discouraged, but he never gave up. Being discouraged and wanting to give up is one of Satan's most powerful tools. And Satan comes at us with discouragement in several different ways. Sometimes he discourages us through problems. Do you have problems? Of course you have problems. Everyone in here has problems that they're dealing with each and every day. Even within the church. Have you ever known of a good work that didn't involve problems? Anything good that you are going to do, anything good that you're going to be a part of, the devil's going to cause problems. He wants you to quit. Noah had problems. You know that Noah had to have lost family and friends. He had to figure out how to gather all these materials and how to feed all the animals and how to keep that ark sanitized. He had problems. Whatever you want to do for God today, you're going to face problems. You can count on it. But can you deal with those problems without giving up? Sometimes he discourages us through pressures. You face pressure every day. Everyone has to deal with pressures. You think Noah was under pressure? I mean, think about the pressure of the size of this ark. Or think about the deadlines that he had 120 years, which may seem like a lot of time, but maybe not to build a boat the size of 1.5 football fields with nothing more than non-mechanical hand tools. And he couldn't walk to Lowe's and Home Depot and just pick up the material that he needed. He had pressure to finish this boat in time with the deadline that God had given him. Do you think that there's pressures that occur today in the church? Elders face pressure. Deacons face pressures. Bible class teachers, they have pressures. Preachers, youth ministers, every single person sitting in the pew faces pressure. But what we cannot allow those pressures to do is cause us to give up. We've got to be willing and able to overcome the problems and the pressures that we face. You know, sometimes he uses people to discourage us. You know, just thinking about this personally, you know, with some of the things that we try to, accomplish in the church and the naysayers that happen within the church. And sometimes the programs that we try to use within the church, they have a lot of good potential, but the people that we have to deal with who are speaking out against those, that's tough. We have to deal with that problem. We can face a lot of different people who want to bring us down and make us quit. I know that not only within the church, but sometimes we're discouraged by even the people that are in our lives. We're discouraged by maybe even friends and family members who've given up themselves, and they want us to as well. You think Noah had to deal with things like this? Of course he did. You know, Satan made sure of it, just like he does with us each and every day. You see, Satan loves it when we use problems and pressures and people as an excuse for not allowing God to work in our lives. We have to work hard to overcome discouragement. And we got to remember that God is looking for people who, even through those things, they choose to never give up, just like Noah did not. The fourth and final thing I want you to consider this morning is that God uses people who are willing to follow him completely. God is looking for people who are all in. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 22, and again in Genesis chapter 7, verse 5, we see that Noah did everything just as God commanded him. What do you think Noah's obedience was due to? If you're a Christian, it's due to your faith. You see, faith is more than just intellectual acceptance. Faith is obeying even if we don't always understand everything there is to understand. Faith is obedience. You know, do you think it made sense for Noah to build a boat when it had never even rained? You think it made sense for him to build the boat the size of 1.5 football fields? And you think it made sense to build it over 500 miles from a large body of water? Yet Noah, like so many men and women of faith in the past, are able to stand up and say, Lord, I'll follow you wherever it leads. Noah was all in. And God will use you too if you choose to be all in. You know, I want to conclude this morning with a little different line of thinking. You see, ordinary people can become one in a million. I want to read one more passage. And again, this might throw you off a little bit. This is Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 and 21, where it tells us that Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. You see, in Genesis chapter 6, Noah was a giant in the world. And his faith couldn't have been any stronger. He spent 120 years building this boat. But then in Genesis chapter 9, he gets drunk and he makes a fool of himself. You see, things like this happen with real people. Abraham, who we all know, lied about Sarah being his wife twice. Jacob, and I've gone too far, Jacob lied to his father, and he cheated his brother out of his birthright. And Moses, he disobeyed God and he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. Rahab was a prostitute. David was an adulterer, and Paul persecuted the church. Yet when we turn to Hebrews chapter 11, where we started this morning, we read the list of God's hall of faith, and all of these people are in it, except for Paul, and he's the one who wrote the book. Here's the good news. Ordinary people, you, me, the people in your school that you have an opportunity to influence, the people in your workplaces who you have an opportunity to influence, we all can become one in a million, just like Noah. When we think about the lost souls that are in this world, we need to remember that God needs me and he needs you in order to reach them. He needs us to be available. He needs us to not be afraid to take a stand. He needs us to be different. He needs us, even through the pressures and the problems and the people that want to bring us down, he needs us to keep fighting and to never give up. And he needs us to follow him completely. He needs us to be all in. Are you all in this morning? Have you blown it? Have you been involved in some ugly sin? Or have you wandered away? Has Satan discouraged you? Or even has Satan used you to discourage others in their Christian walk? we need to remember this morning that God can handle that. God handled it with Noah. God handled it with Abraham and Isaac and Moses and Paul and David. And He can handle it with me, and He can handle it with you. And that is what His love and His grace and His mercy and forgiveness is all about. And we cannot lose sight of that this morning. God can take care of us if we're all in. So do you want to be one in a million this morning? He has shown us the way. If you have never become a Christian, He has asked us in His Word to hear it, to believe it, to repent, to change our lives, to start taking a stand with Him, to confess His name, not just one time before we're buried into Christ, but to confess His name each and every day when we're out in this world in order to make an impact for Him. And He's asked us to be buried, to be baptized into that watery grave where we die to ourselves and we rise to live with Him. A beautiful thing. Have you been baptized this morning? Have you given your life to Him? Or maybe you have, but maybe you've allowed the things in this world to bring you down. Remember, God is able to handle it. All you have to do is give your life over to Him. If there's anything that we can do for you, please don't hesitate while we stand and sing the song.